Now, this is something that you possibly didn't really know about, or if you did, perhaps have underestimated its power.
It was as though the energy just completely left my body, and I collapsed down on the bed and just started sobbing and just thought, I am done.
I developed polycystic ovary syndrome, stress, and then I was kind of like a long burnout situation.
You just ignore, and eventually you will just have a breakdown. So welcome back to Own Your Health with me, Katie Brindle, and my gorgeous cacao facilitator, Chloe Dall'olio, and dear friend, and so many accolades to your name, I don't know where to start, the gorgeous and amazing Rosie Nixon, who is going to talk to us today about a whole host of things. We have all heard about cure, okay, because we come from a Western medical system where you tend to go to the doctor to fix a problem, which therefore becomes cured, and then you're okay. And that's what we grew up with in the 20th century. Anyone enlightened, who I hope is anyone listening to this, has also heard and adopts preventative measures as well, which is now becoming more mainstream. Even our new government has started to put finances behind preventative health techniques, and preventative medicine is now starting to get a bit more attention. But most people in this feed would not know about prevention. But there's another aspect to owning your health, which goes even deeper than prevention itself, and that is alignment. Now, this is something that you possibly didn't really know about, or if you did, perhaps have underestimated its power, because it's subtle. And subtle energy actually has the power to have such great impact on your body. If it's not aligned correctly, it can actually make you sick. So we need to think about this. As enlightened health owners, we need to think about alignment, prevention, and then cure. And the way that I also like to talk about this is that alignment is when your body whispers. Prevention is when your body starts talking, and cure is when it starts shouting. Now, we're used to hearing it shout, and we're used to dealing with that. We're starting to get used to hearing the narrative, but we're not really paying attention to the whispers. But the whispers are vital, and the whispers really have come from the lineage that we as human beings have from the divine parents of the patriarchal sky and the matriarchal earth. Okay, we're trying to kind of keep this nice and secular. Any religious belief systems can be welcome to be layered upon on top. This is a secular narrative here. And the divine feminine was by and large eradicated during the witch hunts. And that's something that we'll talk about in another episode. But the reality is that we don't need to go back over that and why that was wrong and all the rest of it. But the reality is that as a result of killing off all the wisdom keepers of the world, we have ended up in a rather barren land in terms of our understanding of what the divine feminine can do for us, for our health. And so what we're doing today is Chloe has facilitated cacao, which very much connects to the divine feminine. And I've invited the gorgeous Rosie to come on to talk about how important it is to align to the divine feminine and to understand what she teaches us so that we can take our health seriously as a result. And one of the key things that we tend to do either as women or as men who are connected into their inner divine feminine, is we have a tendency to get sort of sidebarred into a lane, into something that we start doing and that we have to carry on doing. And as a result of which, we often, as we get older, get a bit sad because we don't really want to do it anymore. And although to other people it might have sounded like a glittering career and it sounds like you're mad giving it up, you're not happy with it any longer and you feel like you want to make a change. Now, change can also then be scary. So therefore, not changing can make you feel sad and that makes you feel sick, or it makes you feel intimidated and scared and that also makes you feel ill. Or by trying to juggle everything and follow your dream and do all your responsible stuff, you will then get burnt out. So here is the problem. You can either get disillusioned, you can get frightened into staying put and that's not right, or you actually are overwhelmed and overworked. So that's what we're going to talk about today, which is how to align ourselves into alignment and how to navigate the pitfalls of what that can do. So Rosie, I've done loads of talking. You've got so much to say. I'm just going to sit back and drink cacao and listen to you. So tell us first of all about your own personal story, which I think is where we should start.
Yeah, well, I love how you talk about alignment, Katie, because that is very much sort of at the heart of my story. And also the concept of change. You know, I think the world has changed for women. We're all going to live longer. We're focused on longevity. The simple fact is we're going to have 50+ year careers. And we've got to get used to the concept of reinventing in a healthy way before, as I learned the hard way, the stresses and the lack of fulfillment in our lives and the challenges begins to affect us physically. It was a real wake-up call for me, sort of back in 2022 now. And I remember the exact moment that it happened, actually. I was then in my role as editor-in-chief of Hello magazine, where I'd worked for 16 years.
And sorry, just to say, dream job. So
yeah,
again, just
on
to say,
paper.
right. It's, if we were at a dinner party right now, I'd be like, oh my God, when do you know? What's it like? But immediately the energy rises. Yeah, that's one of those jobs, which, I mean, to be the editor of Hello magazine is just insane. That is literally the pinnacle of everything.
Well, it was for me for a great many years. I absolutely loved it. I thrived in that role. You know, I loved the fast pace of it, the putting a magazine to bed every week and another magazine that went to bed on a monthly basis. And then obviously the digital revolution meant we're responding to stories literally minute by minute. But what I hadn't realised, and, you know, looking back and sort of hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it? I realised that I'd probably been running on adrenaline without the tank half empty for probably about at least the last 5 years. I was in that role. Yeah,
Plus children.
Feeling like plus children. Well, that's it. All the added responsibilities of life were coming into play. I had my kids fairly late at 39 and 40.
Also very common.
Yeah, so managing that. And I liken myself as sort of a swan. If you followed me on social media, you'd have seen this woman effortlessly gliding from...
You do come worse. It all looks so relaxed, and I'm always slightly frenetic.
But I've always been a fairly chilled person, or so I thought, you know, taking everything in my stride. But what I loved, what you talked about, alignment being those whispers. I think I had been ignoring for probably about the last 5 years this little whisper in my head that was telling me that things weren't working in quite the same way or quite as well as they had done for me in the past. That we evolve as human beings over the course of our lives. And, you know, during the 16 years of Hello, I was a different person, you know, at that stage of that career to the one I was in the beginning.
Just quickly, just recap your career. So how old were you when you got that job?
So when I got that job, gosh, that was in sort of 2008, I think it was.
How old are you then?
So then I would have been 33.
And so your career before that had been presumably
always women's magazines. Yeah, I worked at Grazia magazine when that sort of launched for 2 years before Hello, a Glamour magazine before that, Red before that, New Woman. Sort of worked my way up in magazines. My first job was actually as editor of Barbie magazine, which is a whole other story. So I started very young and I've slowly gone up in years, up in age. And I thrived in that industry.
And you were in a lane.
I was in a lane.
Top of the lane.
Yeah, and perhaps my identity, you know, I'm sure we're going to get on to talking about that, was very wrapped up in I am a journalist and then an editor in women's magazines. That's what I do. That's my label. And I carry that with me sort of throughout my life. But what happens when that label doesn't seem to fit anymore? And so I can pinpoint it to a moment.
Yes, so this whisper.
Well, I woke up basically. So I'd been having these sort of whispers of thinking, God, I'm absolutely kind of exhausted. My family telling me to get off my phone the whole time. So I was constantly at the mercy of the news agenda. You know, when a story breaks, and that might be midnight on a Friday night, or that might be over the weekend, or when you're on holiday.
Yeah.
A lot of roads ended with me on the title. And perhaps, you know, again, looking back, I wasn't perhaps the best delegator, took on all of that responsibility, which I guess you have to do to a certain extent when you're a founder of your own business, in a leadership role within a company.
All roads
ultimately stops with you. I'm the one that goes to prison if something is written, you know, that's defamation or something legal in the magazine. Oh yeah, no, it's the editor is ultimately responsible. So okay, big responsibility. So we're meaning you kind of, there was this feeling I have to be across everything on the editorial side at least, which was my area. So I woke up, basically, I was in a London hotel. It was the 3rd of October 2022, or the 4th of October, sorry. We'd had a big event the day before, which was the Hello Inspiration Awards, an annual event which I'd hosted and kind of been very involved in putting together, sort of on top of normal other responsibilities. And it'd gone really, really well. But I was up late entertaining downstairs. I woke up that morning after very little sleep, looked in my diary to see a whole just packed day again that day ahead, looked at my phone, which felt as though it was exploding with social media, emails, you know, all these constant bleats of technology that we're all so kind of attached to. And also 2 missed FaceTime calls from my boys from home, from the night before, which I hadn't even noticed until then. And it was as though the energy just completely left my body. And I collapsed down on the bed and just started sobbing and just thought, I am done.
Yeah.
I'm done. Like, I cannot keep this up
So
anymore.
the whisper just went to the shout.
It was like the adrenaline dropped. Yeah, the whisper went to the shout. And it was a real wake-up call to realise that stress lives in your nervous system. If you ignore the warning signs for long enough, as you described, that whisper turns into a loud sort of voice and then becomes shouting.
Well, you then break
when your
down.
health
Yeah.
is affected. So for me, that was kind of teetering on the edge of burnout. I don't think it was full burnout, because I know that there are lots of people that end up even hospitalised or off work for a long period of time. But for me, I think it was also hormonally as well. I was 48 at the time, 40, yeah.
Was there any,
48.
if you don't mind saying, was there any?
Yeah, I think there
menopause
probably was,
stuff
but
going on?
again, I just didn't have time to look into that properly. You know, I had this, like, I never went to the doctors. You know, you just
You just entirely.
well, there's some in a balls. You're constantly juggling and things leap in the air.
What you just described are like, oh, and by the way, folks, I'm off to my GP. So
Yeah, exactly. And you know, knew that the day again was going to be packed. I'd built no time for any rest or recovery from what had been a really busy period. And this was on the back of the Queen passing away, which had obviously been a really then busy time in the media world. And we were putting out special issues, books, you know, all kinds of things. And I basically hadn't had a day off for weeks. And that was the moment that I just thought, right, something has to change here. And basically, I didn't stop crying for about 2 weeks. I couldn't even call the doctor or do anything that day. So I phoned my husband, who was amazing, kind of leapt into action and actually called the doctor, who I spoke to on the phone, who I didn't even know what to do. It was like becoming a child again. I had no idea, even though I'd seen people signed off from work, you know, that were under my management. I'd kind of didn't know what to do when it was myself. And I ended up being signed off work for a few weeks, which again was a shock to me and something that I'd never, ever experienced. But I have to say, even in the darkest sort of worry about what was going to happen from here, there was perhaps the little tiny seed of excitement that something is happening now.
So no creative.
Ignore that voice, because I've just created a shitstorm around myself. I'm currently signed off work. And how am I going to navigate this? But it's time to tune in to who I really am now at this stage of life and get comfortable with the concept of reinventing myself.
Now, with hindsight, do you wish that you had listened to the whispers, or do you think, because many people have whispers?
Yeah.
Chloe, we'll come to your whispers in a second, and I'll talk about mine. But
Yeah.
many people have whispers. So, do you think, because it's so hard to listen to a whisper, because you can just shut it down, you can distract yourself, and in modern society, it is so easy to distract yourself by work, motherhood, aging relatives, Netflix, pace of life. I mean, you can just put those whispers out of the way for literally years on end. Do you wish that you hadn't, or you just kind of...
No, I wish I had listened to the whispers, because I think that we could prevent, you know, some of the physical sort of impact of not listening to those whispers, which were really debilitating and scary. For me, you know, I feel very lucky that, you know, I now consider sort of that breakdown actually a breakthrough, because it did noise the new thing.
Nice.
Yeah, like that. But if I had listened to those whispers earlier and been perhaps a bit more content with the idea of not having all the answers, like change is all about the journey and the sort of ebb and the flow and the twists and the turns. And that's really the exciting part of life. It's the navigating, you know, and listening to, being a bit more intuitive. So I think if I'd listened to those whispers, then perhaps I could have started to sort of seek out some of the things that might bring me joy alongside what I was doing for a period of time.
The first thing here to learn from Rosie's experience here, and we'll talk about ours in a sec, is use your journal.
Yeah.
Get your journal to write your whispers. Okay, so if you've got whispers, acknowledge them. It's okay. The thing about whispers is you don't have to do anything about it yet. You can just go, right, it's over there. I'm not ready for this yet, but I'm going to acknowledge that something is being said to me, and I'm just going to honor it and know it's there. It doesn't mean I have to do anything right now, but it means I'm going to have a think about it. And it's quite a good way of taking ownership of that quiet voice and starting to honor it. Okay. And then as part of that, start to take the creative process and go, okay, so the whisper is likely to be saying, I'm tired, I'm sad, and I'm unhappy. Now, the next question is, that tends to be in Chinese medicine, the spleen talking. Okay, now the spleen is very much an organ of the divine feminine, and it's the earth element. So it's the earth just kind of going, I don't feel very nurtured by this. I kind of did, but I don't anymore because the earth moves in cycles. Now, what happens in the 5 elements is at that point, the liver element gets involved and goes, but what are we going to do? What's going to happen? And the liver is the organ of creativity. So, and it's the structural organ which puts a plan in place.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about the liver is it can sometimes take over and then we can make rash decisions. But when we're doing a journaling technique, the journal gives you the opportunity to just play with this. And it's like when I talk to some of my lovely account business lady, Helen, when we're having a bit of a nightmare with the business and I'm sort of going creative and it all stays terribly expensive very quickly, I go, Helen, it's just numbers on a spreadsheet. No one spent any money. We can just take things out and put them back in and we're all safe. And she goes, okay, fine. It's the same thing with your journal. It's just words on a page. You're just articulating your kind of innermost dialogue. And that gives you an opportunity to start gently planning, to go, right, well, I can't make a change quite yet and I don't feel safe to do so, but I am at least going to explore that created essence of the germination of a creative process. So actually, if I could just, Chloe, come to you now on this one, because you also have had an amazing career. Do you want to just talk about your story? Because you also effectively stepped away from an amazing career where everyone goes, oh, you're that person. And now you're this person. So what happened to you and what's your regret in terms of anything at all, / the things that you did well that you're now so grateful that you did?
Ooh. Okay, big question. How?
I know. Well, this is a big topic. This is a big podcast. This is about owning your health. There's nothing more important.
I love that. Yes, I have been working with Trini Woolo for 10 years, helping her creating her brand, Trini London, even before, creating it from scratch before we launched.
Which is hugely successful.
Which is huge, which is like a beauty empire, which is I'm really proud of. So from social media, creative, mood boards, from the beginning of the creative to then take over the video production, so like filming myself and then actually managing a video production team and then directing some of the all of the entertainment side of the video, of the storytelling of the business, and then helping some with the community. So it was a dream job.
Another dream job. Another dinner party. Wow, you're that first. And I'm immediately sitting here thinking, oh no, it's okay, I created for you. I'm like,
yeah, absolutely. But then as well, on the background, I've always had this passion for like movement and body and art, and like I'm also an artist, and I've always had to keep everything that was outside that job outside because I didn't have the energy to actually dedicate myself to other passions that I had to go. So like work is amazing, it's the zone of excellence, but then the zone of genius sometimes is like something else that you need really more time in focus and space to do. So you put it on the side. I was doing some dance and movement and started doing some courses. I've always done courses on the side, but I've never been able to actually dedicate time to do something else apart from doing extra full-time, always thinking about the full-time job. And I've never as well listened to the whispers. I developed polycystic ovary syndrome, stress, and then I was kind of like a long burnout situation where since when I moved to the UK, like 12 years ago, I started gaining weight and more, like probably, I don't know if it was 10, 15 kilos or more. And I kept doing it until now. 1 year ago, I changed my career and I started looking after myself and I started putting in place things to realign and actually balance my weight, because I also want to become a mother one day. I'm 37 this year, but everything is off balance, off whack. So I need to rebalance everything and then make the space to actually decide what I want to do and how I want to dedicate my life. So I had to really make a big change to be like, okay, Chloe, you're not just that job. You're not just the sidekick of Trini. Like, you have so much that you can give to the world. You need to give yourself the chance to actually be Chloe full time.
Dude, that's brave.
That's super brave.
To be the sidekick of Trini, it was just like, okay, let's give you some kind of language here. Yeah. To be acknowledged by somebody as incredible as her, who is just so unbelievably successful. To be acknowledged,
it's a privilege, of course.
It's absolute privilege to be in the light and part of that creative process. So to be in that position at all is incredible. But of course, also, we all know as women in business how unbelievably hard and competitive it is to just get any headway whatsoever as a woman in business, because it's such a stitch up. So to be part of that journey, would have naturally have been absolutely all-consuming and absolutely exhausting, but because it had to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes to the second part of the question. You're like, what are you grateful for your career that you would you? Well, exactly that. Like having the opportunity to like work alongside Trini and learn from her for 10 years, and what highs and lows of like the beauty industry and everything that is around it, and learning a lot from Trini also as not as a performer, but as a storyteller in front of the camera and as a communicator and educator as well, taught me a lot about also filming. Like I also worked behind and in front of the camera. So all of the skills of like how to communicate effectively, that was a huge lesson.
So how's your health? Were you a whisper to a shout or were you a whisper to a talk? It sounds like, where were you? I'm on the Richter scale of where we're going.
I think probably started whispering after a couple of years of doing everything in different roles, and then started talking, and then started screaming for so long, and then it became just a normal condition where I can hear the screams, but it's too much effort to actually pay attention.
So at this point in both these stories, what I'm hearing is the bravery that it takes to come out of that actually sort of slightly diminishes because your health starts to break. The voice becomes so loud that you have no choice but to leave, because there'll be lots of people probably around you going, you're mad, why would you do this? And levels of self-doubt. But the good thing about the body, okay, because ultimately your health is everything. So eventually the body wins. That's my message as a health practitioner over here, to go, ultimately your body will win. Eventually, if you don't listen, if it gets all the way to the back, it's going, I listen. Like Beyonce at the end of her song in Dreamgirls, like, I listen, and that bit. And she's like really going for it at the end. That's when your body is going, I will give you no option.
Yeah.
Because the thing about
I'm
bodies,
going to physically stop.
right? Because bodies are designed, 1, to live, and 2, to procreate. Now, what happens as women is that your procreative abilities will start to shut down, because what the body will do is it will eliminate 2 in order to focus on 1. It's got to keep you alive at all costs. That's its job. That is the job of your body. And bodies are amazing. So they will. So they will start to talk to you gently, go, oh, I'm not really happy. And then you just ignore, and eventually you will just have a breakdown. And you would have just gone, if I don't make this jump now, I'm going to have to. So to the audience listening, if you're thinking about this, to just say, if you don't do it, and if you don't do the Germany take, they obviously don't do it if you don't want to, but if you don't do it, eventually you will be in that position where you have to do it. And you both were at that position. I also was. It was when I was about 28 years old. My story, most people know this listening to this, I was going to be an opera singer. Actually, I'm really glad I wasn't. But anyway, I had this car accident, so that was the end of that anyway. And as a result of the car accident, I lost the ability to sing. Luckily, I can still talk. And I'd made a career out of that instead. But for a period of time, for about sort of 7 years, I was working in marketing. And I had kind of worked my way into a kind of sort of dream job scenario. So another one of these amazing jobs. So here we are at this dinner party, all impressing each other with our amazing jobs. Oh, yes, well, I, of course, launched all this stuff. I'm so cool. And I reached 28 and I had my existential crisis where I wasn't ill, but I hit that I can't do this anymore moment. I just thought, I'm literally sick and tired of this. And whilst it all sounds great, and whilst I need to pay the rent and all the rest of it, I literally am dying inside. And I had this wake-up call, and it so happened that at that moment in time, my shoulder, which was the other part of the injury, was playing up. And I went and had, I went to a Chinese clinic, just a random place, random, just walking down the Edgware Road with a supermarket bag from Sainsbury's. So uncool. And it was 10 minutes of massage for about 10 quid. And I'm like, you know what? I actually don't care what you do to me because it's so painful. In I go. And I had an epiphany, because the Chinese doctor that was in there happened to be incredible, because they're not always, and happened to be, did gua sha, changed my life. And I walked out and went, that's it. I'm giving up my job. I'm giving up my boyfriend. I'm giving up my everything. I'm giving up my whole life. I'm killing it. I don't care anymore. I don't care. My parents, they're nuts. My friends, because I decided to become a masseuse. All my friends, this is back in the day before wellness. Everyone said to me, oh, do you do extras? Literally, I was treated like a sex worker. I'm not joking. I literally was. I've got stories to tell on that front. And you just sit there go, and that was my entry point into becoming a healer. And I never look back, and I just took the bull by the horns. I do what I always do. I just say, I'm doing it, and to hell with the consequence. I just threw my deck of cards up in the air and thought, I literally don't care. I'm doing it. I'm going to somehow make it work, and I did. And my health suffered, I guess, in the long term as well, because I had to overwork. But I listened to the whispers, and I did, and I'm glad I did. So again, the first part of this is to say, listen to the whispers, because if you don't, it's going to start shouting.
But also, I think those whispers have to be rooted in sort of the reality of your own life when you start listening to them. Because I think for a lot of people, you feel quite paralysed, as I did, by the thought of, look, the whispers are saying this isn't working for me anymore. but my whole identity is tied into this role. Like, who am I? I've got kids, I've got people that are dependent on me. So it would be silly to listen to the whispers and say, let's all just jack in the jobs that we hate and are not serving us in. That is not the reality that most people find themselves. And yes, but to your point though, of not sort of moving straight then onto that organized phase where you kind of kick into action, and the liver, as you mentioned, sort of makes you want to be action orientated and do something about it. I'm now really passionate about having sort of retrained as a life coach, completely changed my life, and I now run reinvention retreats for midlife women. But
Yes.
but we talk, and so I'm very passionate now about the concept of reinventing, and I call it reinvent like a pro. The pro stands for pause, reflect, and organize.
Right.
And that pause phase might need to be quite long for some people, and that could be a couple of years of just having these thoughts. Journaling, as you said, is such a brilliant tool, starting to make it feel like a tangible thing. Well, no, and then you sort of move into reflect, which is a bit more kind of asking the questions about it to evoke self-awareness, really digging into what are your values at this stage of life, what are your strengths, what are the things that really bring you joy, and really then sort of starting to look at also where you've come from, reconnecting with who you were, and those the love that you have. Like you mentioned, when you were working with Trini, you had to put to one side your love of art and sort of all these other things, reconnecting with all of that. So a big period of reflection, and only then are you ready to perhaps, and the reflection could also include looking at finances and what is enough for me? What do I actually physically, need to earn in a month to kind of make my life work? And then you're ready to move into the organized phase. But I think the reason why I took such a sort of swift kind of downward turn was because I was always going straight on to organize the next thing, and I didn't build any time in my diary to just stop, to pause and to reflect. So now looking back, I call it thrive time, building thrive time diary. Really, after knowing I'd have had such a busy period, I should have just booked myself a day off work, or thought I'm not going to start my meetings till 11 o'clock because I'm in this lovely hotel. I want to go and book a massage and use the pool.
Yeah, we just lie in bed.
Yeah, or just lie in bed. Yeah, exactly. Just a chance, whatever we can fit. And there sometimes are micro moments of pause, but to fit those into our diaries and to prioritise them as much as we would any important meeting.
So Rosie does these amazing retreats, which I've been very privileged to be part of.
I really felt that there wasn't anywhere for me to turn sort of when I felt like this. And this is quite a expression of sort of modern life. And I think we're quite a new generation to be experiencing this, because life was much more linear for those generations that came before us. You worked, and then you retired.
Well, always women you didn't,
and then you drew your pension.
Yeah,
or you didn't work.
Yeah.
And then you drew your pension. Yeah. And then you sort of, had a retirement, and then you died. Like, we're all going to live so much longer. We've got to get used to the concept of reinvention and see it as a healthy and kind of a natural part of life. Because really, we don't know anything for sure in our lives other than the fact that one day they'll come to an end. But I felt like there was nowhere that really kind of understood me as a modern sort of midlife woman, one who had been very engaged with her career, but also wanted to be more present as a mother. And I bought all the books on burnout. So I didn't even really like the whole vocabulary around it. I found it quite masculine and really negative, which is why I'm so passionate about reinvention, sort of that stage before burnout.
You had the most, because of your career, you knew a few people, let's to put it mildly, which is actually how our paths crossed.
Yes.
So you did have this incredible black book of experts.
Yes.
Which is what you've invited into
the retreats.
Yes.
So the retreats are really accessible day retreats. And we're always in lovely luxury surrounds, because that feels like a nurturing, pampering environment. And I bring in the experts, and we work through the reinvent like a pro sort of formula. So we have pause sessions, reflect sessions, and organize. And that's not to say you need to snap into organize as soon as you leave the retreat, but it just fills you with the inspiration from proper experts in their fields to look at your life in another way, and actually just take that time out. It's actually a really emotional moment on the retreat days, and women generally come on their own. And, that realization that they haven't actually put the focus on their own personal development, what they actually really want from their lives. like ever, or for at least sort of a decade or two.
And I think the other thing, because obviously I've been lucky to come to a couple of these, is what's amazing and what I want to convey into the podcast now is that if you're having these moments where these whispers are sort of germinating and you're feeling a bit restless, it's I think what you've done here is you've normalized it, because you've just hit the nail on the head. We are now living, the life expectancy now is much greater than it ever was before, and pensions are not as existent as they used to be, and women are now allowed to go into the workplace. And not only that, we are now recreating the workplace, because the workplace was designed by men. So we as a generation went to the patriarchy in order to be equal. We had to behave like men in male structures. What's disseminating at this exact moment in time is we're now recreating them in more aligned into the divine feminine, and therefore the regeneration and recreation is very much that narrative. Now, many women don't even realize this is happening. Many men, it's not just a female thing. Many people do not realize that this is happening, but it is. And it's important for us to take ownership. And what I noticed on the retreats is that we're all going through it, because regeneration is a thing. The earth regenerates every single year. Now, the fact that the divine feminine was sort of obliterated with the genocide of the wisdom keepers, never mind about that. Let's just bring all the wisdom back, because the wisdom hasn't died, because it's right here, because it's true. So the idea is that as we go into the 21st century, it is absolutely vital for us to understand that as you go through the course of your life, just because you went through a certain experience at a certain moment in your life does not mean that that is your full life story. Yeah. That Chloe was always going to be part of the Trini Empire. I mean, you parted in great turns and great friends, and everyone's gone on to carry on doing other things, and there's nothing wrong with that. I was a singer, and then I was a marketeer, and then I created a business, and then I realized that actually I preferred talking about the ideas rather than the products, and that's fine too. And then I became an author, and then I became a marketeer again, and now I'm a talker, not a singer, and now I'm singing healing sounds, and I'm like, oh my God.
And a podcast.
And a podcaster. So what happens now is, the way I described it to Chloe the other day was, life is like a festival if you get it right. So it's like you've got your kind of like your pyramid stage, which is where the big acts take place. But then also, as well as the pyramid stage, all this other really cool tents as well. And you can just bob across and have a little dance to this rhythm over here, and then bob back again and listen to Rod Stewart, and then bob. You can see I've just been watching. I live in Glastonbury, and then you bob over here and off you go to Block 9, and then you come and listen to Solomon, and then you come back again, and away you go. And I think if we can, as a community, recognize that we don't need to be frightened by the enormity of how it may feel when you're staring at it in front of you, which often makes you just kind of go back into your box and back into your lane and think, no, I'm staying put, because the body ultimately is going to take you there anyway, as you both said, and as I've said too, that you get burnout, or you get overwhelmed, or you basically just ultimately feel frightened and then feel sad. And let's just talk about the joy for a minute. So you've now been through the process of pause, reflect, and organize. So you've done all of those things, and you've organized and navigated your ways, as have I, out of where we were into where we are. So how does it feel now?
It feels great, because I feel like I literally took all of that wisdom and the bits that I loved, the wisdom gained and the experience, everything from the first half of my working life. Like, none of your life experience is wasted, is what I'm trying to say.
No education is
Reinvention isn't about starting from scratch. It's about tweaking sort of what exists, but taking the best parts with you for the next part of the journey. So for me, while I was journaling, and I did a lot of my journaling actually on my phone as I was going for long walks all around Surrey where I live, and during the weeks I had off, and now I do it as a regular weekly practice. And I started to write in columns, the things that I absolutely loved about my working life, the things that I didn't mind, and the things that I could ditch. And really revealing for me was that, I loved talking to a largely midlife female audience. I loved sort of creating events that would inspire people. I love having all these conversations about well-being, but I just didn't care about celebrity and royal news anymore. And that felt so revelatory to me to actually admit that to myself. And once I kind of wrote it down, I felt really naughty at first. I was still in my job, and that was my whole currency. And then I wrote it down, and I got more and more comfortable with that concept over sort of the coming weeks. And the world didn't fall apart.
People listening to this, the number one concern that immediately pops up is, can I afford to do this?
Yes. Now, I think the thing that we find very tricky, and I don't know whether it's especially a British thing, but is the endings and navigating the ending of something is really tough for us. And we do often need support to get through that. Again, that's the topic that we tackle on the retreats. So then it was, how am I going to extricate myself from this role and this identity? They're all just expecting me to go back to work after being a little bit tired. But for me, this is much deeper. So it was having those difficult conversations with my boss. I went over to Madrid, where our head office was, to talk to him. And I had a very honest conversation with him. And again, the world didn't end. It was okay to say, look, and I actually called it our conscious uncoupling. The phrase that Chris and Martin and Gwyneth Paltrow used, that look, actually, this offers an opportunity for the magazine. I've outgrown this role. I've loved it for years. I want to leave on a high. But I'd already started on the side. And Katie, you were so instrumental, the conversations that we had over really that couple of year period when I was thinking about what I wanted to do. I'd started writing my novels and kind of other things on the side. It really brought me joy and reconnected with why I got into journalism in the first place, because I loved writing. And storytelling, I realised, is the thread that goes through everything I do. You know, even on the magazine, I helped personalities tell their stories to a wider audience. I love my fiction writing as well. And now in working with the women on the retreats and coaching, I help people retell the stories that are now true, you know, create new narratives about their life and reconnect with the stories that are really sort of authentic to them. So it was a kind of period of 2 years in getting out of Hello then. I initially went down to 3 days a week. I did a coaching course on the side. And I came up with a figure in my head that ideally I needed to have a client that would pay X amount per month, which was the minimum my husband and I felt that, you know, I could bring in to still contribute to the household. So it was going to be less than I was earning at Hello for a period of time until I built up my other career. So there was a period of time, you know, where I was sort of looking on the side for what that could be. I then ended up getting something with another brand. But that involved going out, networking, you know, sort of speaking to trusted confidants within my circle, doing lots of research on LinkedIn, seeing what kind of roles were out there. So that's all the organised phase, you know, making a plan of what are the micro tasks that you can put into a diary and start doing. Things that take half an hour to an hour, and you start to diarise them, that will help you sort of build up new avenues into the new chapter that you want to pursue, and also start to help you really think of yourself in terms of a new identity. Because I think the whole of my status had been very much tied into the identity of editor of Hello for such a long time. And now I feel like I have status spread out, and status is important to us as human beings, you know, and that goes right back to early times when we lived in, you know, arable communities. There was status within the village and the tribe because everybody needed to have a role to keep it running. And so that's integral to us as human beings. But I think if your status is all tied into one thing, it can really affect you really badly when that starts to not work out for you anymore. So now I feel like I have status in lots of different areas of my life. I'm so much happier because my status is spread out. So one thing isn't going so well, but that's all right because it's really going well over here.
One thing that I've learned from working with you is, because you're that little bit younger and there's more normality in the kind of the 20, 30 somethings about having all sorts of different things, all sorts of strings to your bow. And that's absolutely normal. Whereas in our generation, it wasn't that. When you leave school, you become a something. What are you going to be when you grow up? Singular. Like, what is the one thing you're going to do with your life? And I remember being so overwhelmed because, of course, the job of a healer didn't exist. So I'm like, and the internet didn't exist. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't want to do any of these jobs. They're all awful. And I remember, this is a really terrible thing to admit, but when I was a little girl, I used to sort of look at my mum and dad, you know, and kind of look at what my dad had to do in a day and kind of think, well, when he gets to go out of the house, that's quite fun. And he kind of comes back and like plays sport, and that sounds quite fun. And he doesn't seem to have to do very much at the weekends, so that's quite fun. But I don't know, the work stuff, because he was an engineer. I thought, well, that doesn't sound like fun. That's because that's like maths and I couldn't do that. So I looked at my mum and I was like, right, okay, so what did she get to do? Well, she used to be in her nightdress for quite a long time each morning, which I've definitely inherited that gene because I love being in my pajamas. So I am literally like, so I used to, okay, that's quite nice. And she used to drink quite a lot of tea and I quite like that too. But then her job didn't seem very interesting because she was a secretary, because in those days that was kind of it for most women. And I was like, well, that looks boring because she just sort of types things all day and I don't really want to actually, that sounds quite dull. And then the person that gives her the stuff is a man, and like that doesn't seem right. So her job seemed inferior, but the kind of the early start in the morning, and then she got to pick me up from school. I quite like that bit. Yeah. So I remember going through a bit of a childhood crisis for quite a long time, thinking, I don't want to do I want that bit over there and then this bit over here. And then, of course, I realised it was a very binary 20th century situation, middle class, North London situation I've been born into, with everyone fulfilling their roles. But that's now moved on massively with your generation, where you can be a DJ, a dancer, a cacao facilitator, you are a content queen, you are an amazing woman in your own right, you're an influencer. Have I missed anything? You're a model?
Yeah.
You are also, you're an artist?
Yes.
But that's 7 things.
I'm not a DJ yet. I mean, I tried, but I'm training.
Watch this space. It's only a matter of not long.
Sometimes it's about like creating the role model that you didn't have, like you, no?
Yeah.
Like just picking and trying to understand what brings you joy. See if you can make it into like a job or a career, and then see how you can put them together and how much time and space you can give to each of them, and create your own role model.
We all actually have navigated doing multiple strings to our bows, and somehow or other it somehow works. And I think one of the main things is that the divine feminine is back in the 21st century. Social media and tech has allowed it to open up and loosen up, and always remember that the creative process and the divine feminine who really brings creativity in, there's all sorts of things that happen that you don't yet know. So if we think about this, when we were all younger, we didn't have tech, we didn't have podcasting, we didn't have influencers, none of these jobs weren't even there. So who's to say what's going to ChatGPT wasn't there? Even when I first met you, that didn't exist. So now there's all these mainstream things, and things are accelerating, and new shoots and opportunities are emerging all the time. So it's always important when you're doing your pro, so pause, reflect, organize, to always remember that if you think, but it's not possible because how am I going to do it? The how, you'll be amazed at how when you start to open your heart and let the cacao speak and let the heart lead, somehow or other, it kind of somehow happens.
Yeah, we have it inside us. We just need to start listening to it. We just need to follow the intuition and drop into like a state where you're like, actually, things are possible. What do I actually love? What brings me joy? Can I follow that? And give ourselves permission to listen to it.
Now, that is the topic of our next podcast, because that is worthy of an hour's conversation with Chloe about just that. But suffice to say for this episode, to say, just trust us on the fact that the how will come.
Yeah.
The key thing is to take Rosie's amazing pro, which is going to be the topic of her next book and is already in existence in your amazing retreats, which already happen. So I really recommend people to have a look, because I get to go on them too. So you get to meet both of us. But the pro idea is the key thing to focus on. Use your journals and just take stock, take pause, listen to the whisper. Don't panic.
Yeah.
Don't ignore it.
And think about action when you're in pause.
Rosie and Chloe, thank you so much for joining us today. Take our enthusiasm and go, it is possible.
Where there is a will, there is a way.
Oh, yes. And with that, I think we shall say cheers to that. So thank you all for joining.
Makiyosh. Thank you.
Makiyosh.